heels of Tuesday's midterm, one high-profile senator is warning the U.S. may be in for a big fall if Congress and the White House fail to get spending under control. On CNBC yesterday, Senator Gregg warned the United States economy could become a disaster zone just like Greece. And Senator Gregg joins us now. He's also the ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee. Why are you so pessimistic about what the future holds here, Senator Gregg?
Well, unfortunately, the numbers don't lie. In this situation, the debt is going to double in 5 years and triple in 10 years. Deficits are going to average $1 trillion a year for the next 10 years if we stay on the course we're on. And if you look at the Greek numbers, we're actually going to be passing Greece's situation, where Greece had a debt to GDP ratio of about 100%. We'll be past that within 7 years if you take all our debt. In fact, we'll be past that before then. Now, we're obviously not Greece. We're a much stronger economy. We're a much more vibrant nation from a standpoint of economic resilience. And therefore, we can weather this much longer than Greece could. But on this course, we're headed towards fiscal insolvency. We're headed towards passing on to our kids a bankrupt nation where the currency comes under huge pressure because people will have the international community will be very reticent to buy our debt, or will force us to pay an extraordinarily high price to take our debt.
Often when people are criticizing the amount of debt America has, they're pointing to a couple recent things. They're talking about health care reform, and they're talking about stimulus spending. You have the president's former budget director, Peter Orszag, writing in today's New York Times, saying that to save money, the Senate should focus on the cost-saving measures in the health care reform. I mean, he's pointing to an estimate from the Congressional Budget Office that projects that if you enact both pieces of legislation and the reconciliation proposal, it would produce a net reduction in federal deficits of $143 billion over the next 9 years or so. So what do you have to argue with on that front?
If you believe that, let me sell you a bridge in Brooklyn. I mean, the problem is this. There are two basic drivers of our problem. One is the health care bill and the stimulus package as it compounds in the out year. The health care bill adds $2.5 trillion to the size of the government, takes the size of the government from 20% of GDP to 24% of GDP. And it adds brand new major entitlements. The second driver of the problem, and the bigger driver, is the demographic shift. We go from 35 million retired people to, when the baby boom generation is fully retired within 5 years from now, to 70 million retired people. And we have this entitlement system in this country which basically locks in the benefit structure to those folks, which is unaffordable to the people who are paying the taxes, the younger people. So those two things combined create this problem. When
we were talking, you and I, leading up to the passage of health care reform, one of the things that I asked over and over, and not just you, but your colleagues as well, I asked, is health care in this country and access to health care a fundamental right? Because the way that we're operating right now is that people do go to the emergency room, they get on Medicaid or Medicare, and they get health care, but it's not always given in the most cost-efficient way. And we just have to decide as a nation, either we're for people getting access to quality health care or we're not, because the government was already spending, and you know this as well, private citizens and corporations were already spending an arm and a leg to pay for health care.
Well, you're right, but the issue isn't really right or privilege. The issue is what type, and it was your second point, what type of health care system can we afford? I believe we can afford a high-quality health care system if we change it fundamentally so that we reward health care providers for giving quality rather than giving quantity. And there's been a lot of talk about this, and there's been a lot of discussion about this as to how you do it. Unfortunately, the health bill as it passed really did very little to energize the shift of health care away from being basically a system where we reimburse people for utilization to being a system where we reimburse people because they're developing quality services at lower costs.
And it wasn't just Republicans who were disappointed with the outcome of health care reform. There were a lot of Democrats who didn't think that it really tackled what the problems were. So now the Senate is going to go in, and you're not going to be part of this new Senate that votes on raising the debt ceiling. But say somebody like Rand Paul, who's very concerned about the deficit, when they in the Senate vote to raise the debt ceiling, should he try some procedural roadblocks to keep that from happening? Is it worth that?
Well, I think a debt ceiling vote is one of those votes where you can focus hopefully action on doing something about the spending in the future. Now, debt ceiling is paying off a credit card where the bills come due. You've already spent the money, you got to pay the money. But it also is an action forcing event. It's one of the few times where you can actually get the Congress to do things which are really substantive on the issue of future spending. And so, yes, I think the debt ceiling should be used as a point at which you put in place procedural things. For example, it ought to take a supermajority, not just a 60-vote point of order, but a 67-vote point of order to declare an emergency on something so that you waive basically the budget. We declare emergencies on everything in the Congress, and we're spending money like crazy at 51 votes. It ought to take 67 votes to do that,
Senator
so that you
Gregg,
got real emergencies. Yes?
If you're so concerned about the picture that's facing this nation, then why didn't you run for re-election?
Well, you know, Contessa, I've been in elective office for 30 years, and at some point you just got to move on, and this was the right point for Kathy and I, my wife. We talked about it a lot. Yes, it would be exciting to still be in the Senate. I love the Senate. It's a great place to serve, but as a practical matter, it is time for me to move on and give the options to other people to undertake this job. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to stay engaged. I intend to stay engaged. There are groups like the Concord Coalition and others who are out there being voices of reason on this issue, and I think we need to continue to make it clear to the American people and explain to the American people what has to be done. And these decisions are going to be very hard politically, but they have to be taken.
Senator Gregg, it's always good to see you. I appreciate your time today, sir.